Okay. It says we should be live now, so let's just wait, Joe, just for a few minutes just to see if we've got any people online. They might have given up because we were late.
No one wants to come and listen to me.
Of course they do.
Oh, I did see that question come up though. That's one that I like. The testosterone and the, was it Anavar?
Anavar, yeah. We can pick that up in a second. Let's just guys, thanks for joining us. Have you been asking Jazz?
She's on here. I'm not with Jazz. She's in Birmingham, I think.
There's a few people joining. So, hi Jenny, how you doing? We'll just capture any people that are joining before we start. Have you had a good day today, Joe? How's it been?
Yeah, it's been busy. I've just got off my last call now. I've got all my check-ins and whatnot done, which is nice. I don't train on a Thursday, so I do most of my tier 3 clients, which are like face-to-face calls as opposed to video check-ins. So I just do them pretty much one after the other all day. It's mostly mentoring clients on a Thursday.
Yeah.
And a great one this week. One of my hey, look, he's here. Gareth. I was literally about to say, but he's just
so you can see. I didn't know if you can see them. So
I clicked on comments.
Okay, cool.
Gareth, one that would normally be on the he's one of my mentees. He's just managed to quit his job because we've got him enough clients to coach with. So
that's the Scottish guy, isn't it? That was in Corpus the other day.
Yes, yeah.
How you doing, Gareth? Thanks for joining. Wait, let's because there's quite a few people on now, so there's enough to make a start, Joe. So, do you want to just tell us about you? Who is Joe Jeffries? Just tell us a little bit of background about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not very good at these. I think at the heart of it, I'm a guy that is just a bit of a meathead. Love lifting weights, love bodybuilding. I just want to get jacked at the end of the day. That's like me as the most basic form. There's nothing particularly unique. I think I have a proclivity for learning. I'm quite good at retaining information and stuff like that. And combine that with my obsession with gaining muscle and or physique development in general. I found myself quite a unique sense coaching and maybe digging into. I caught that wave when evidence-based coaching became popular, but I did it from a rather unique standpoint. I was coming from a pharmacology side, and it wasn't so much the nutrition and resistance training side uniquely. So I was very lucky to fall into working within something that I'm extremely passionate and love. So, and I'm able to do things like this with you, Matt, this evening. So I couldn't appreciate you guys tuning in anymore.
Awesome. So, before we dive into, I've just got some. So you're only 26 years old yourself, Joe. Yep. So where did it all start? How did it happen about? How did it come about?
So before I was coaching, I was actually a full-time session musician. I was a guitar player, but then I met my now wife at BST Gym in Northampton. And my work at that time had me traveling a lot, and Jasmine was living in Manchester at the time. And I mean, admittedly, I just fell in love with Jazz and didn't want to not see her as much as I could do. I think in my head, I had that dream of any man that falls in love with a woman is I wanted to be with her 24 hours of the day, and my job didn't account for that. So I was trying to figure out a way to get around it, and I pretty much was interested in chemistry and pharmacology in my spare time. I wasn't really into the gym or lifting or anything like that, but Jasmine was more so than me. She was competing in bikini back then. I was quite into martial arts, and I lifted weights a few times a week, but nothing like I wasn't that into bodybuilding. And I would write little chemistry articles mostly for myself. It's a weird thing, and I don't know how I kind of fell into it, but I really like things that have a proof that I can say this is the way, at least as much as we know of the evidence of something. And I became relatively obsessed with that. And Jazz said, hey, you should start putting some of this stuff online because it's quite good. I was like, no, because back then I didn't have an Instagram or anything like that. I used to post on like pharmacology forums with nerds and stuff, you know. She was like, no, people would like this stuff. So I started writing some articles, and luckily they got kind of picked up by the right people. Someone asked me to prep them for a bodybuilding show. I thought, okay, you know, there's some physiological rules involved in that I can work out and we can stick to. And he did quite well. And then I got another client, and he did well, and I got another client, and I just kind of, it snowballed from there, and I ended up falling in love with bodybuilding, really, and that's how we've ended up here today.
So you've told me, I obviously know you quite well, Joe, and you've told me about training at Temple Gym. Where does that fit in that? Because you're up in Manchester, and then did you?
Yeah, no, this is before that.
Okay.
I used to go to Temple when I was younger. I had this again obsession with Dorian Yates, because he was a man that I felt like I could relate with, because I would see him say quotes like, I would read everything I could find. I wanted to be fully educated on the subject. And that's something that I did. I got a session with Dorian when I was maybe 18. And then I got another one a few months later. And then I had another one a few months after that. And I was training down Temple, but I would get the train there from Northampton. But I live right next to the train station. Or I did, where I grew up. So it wouldn't be longer than, what is it to Birmingham? Like an hour. And Temple Street, the original Temple Gym, was right there. And so this was through like a summer holidays. I'd go down to Temple Gym that way. And yeah, man, that's really where bodybuilding kind of pricked up for me. I love it. And I used to go with two of my friends that used to train in Northampton. We all trained at Better Bodies, but we'd go down to Temple for our sessions. And yeah, but that was before I ever met Jazz, and I wasn't taking bodybuilding seriously. That's how, I mean, we got talking because I recognized that she was doing bikini, and I was saying, you know, I used to like bodybuilding a lot, but I kind of let it get a bit away from me, and ended up falling back into it in a way.
Yeah. So obviously you found Dorian as kind of someone that you could associate yourself with because of you know the way that he spoke around trying to learn everything. But from a physique perspective, was it, you know, where when you looked at a physique, or when you looked at physiques, who was it that you felt had one of the best physiques? Was it Dorian himself still, or?
I've always said that. I'm you know, I can confidently say Dorian Yates isn't the best bodybuilder ever by bodybuilding standards. He's not. Yeah. He is my favorite physique ever, though. I wouldn't say I model myself on him because I will never look like Dorian. Never. Never. But he is my favorite physique, just that grainy, like twisted metal look. I love that. It's just the first real freak factor for me.
Yeah, I mean, we've met Tom Platt quite a few times. Tom's come over and told us a lot of stories, and obviously Tom was in that era where Arnold was just kind of, you know, had left the scene, and Tom was there and surrounded by some of the other guys, and he said he remembered being on stage, and he said you could almost he was in a relaxed front pose, and then he said you could almost hear, it felt like an elephant hitting the stage and his feet just stomping on the stage, and he said he turned around and everyone was looking at this monster. It's the first of his kind, almost as was Dorian Yates, and he said that is what changed bodybuilding and moving forward from that point to that mass monster kind of. It was at that point Dorian was the kind of the main instigator of that physique, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was the first real, what you'd probably call mass monster, I think.
Yeah, that's clearly what he is, a mass monster, the original mass monster.
Yeah, how can you not love that?
Exactly. So there are a couple of questions that we can start taking them on, and some of them came from Instagram, so we'll pick them up. But just before we start, obviously, a lot of these questions are around chemicals and potentially, you know, have health outcomes. So Joe isn't a doctor, he's not a medical practitioner, but all his and then Joe will tell you this himself. Anything that he studies and is backed up by, it's all evidence based and backed up. So take it as you will. It's Joe's knowledge. It's as good as in the industry. So should we tackle this first question then? This came from Instagram, and this from Matthew Guess, and this is something that he's taken at the minute. 500 milligram test an anphate per week, plus 70 milligrams of VAR every day. His estrogen is mid 70s, but with no side effects. And he's asking, should he take an aromatase inhibitor?
I think it's important to recognize here that he said he's had no side effects. So that means he hasn't realized any off-target deleterious effects, any adverse events. So my immediate question would be, why are we insinuating that estrogen outside of the physiological range? And when we say estrogen here, I should note that we're talking about estradiol, which is one of a few estrogen metabolites, but the primary one in men. So the answer really would be no, and I'll quote Dr. Scott Howells here: optimal cellular physiology of sex steroid target tissues vitally depends on the androgen to estradiol ratio rather than a single hormone action in isolation. So you can look at these side effects as potential imbalances of inputs. So the imbalance here would be androgens to estradiol, or is the term that he's used here just estrogen. If you haven't got side effects, then your escalated estrogen has been balanced by your escalated androgen side of the equation. And to be honest with you, estrogen is a very potent performance enhancing molecule in and of itself. So should you take an AI? No way. No. There's only going to be negative health outcomes there. Cognitive.
Is that, I mean, obviously this is he's used a stack that, he's told you about a stack, but your view on taking an AI anyway, what's your view on AIs?
There is absolutely no reason why anybody, maybe outside of a breast cancer patient, but even that's contested widely, should use an aromatase inhibitor. Definitely not bodybuilders that have control over their stack design. Like, the question would be, okay, let's say you've escalated this. Let's say this stack design did cause this individual side effects. So there wasn't an off-target leak, so to speak, of deleterious health effects. Let's just say that now. And we then used an AI. We would be attenuating the estrogen side of the equation. We would then ask ourselves, well, is there anything novel testosterone is doing that would require us to keep it in, but have to attenuate the estrogen side of the equation with an ancillary drug that brings about deleterious health effects in and of itself? And the answer to that would be no. Essentially, anabolic steroids all do exactly the same thing, at least when it comes to like RNA transcription of anabolism at the androgen receptor itself. So maybe my question would be, well, maybe instead of using a drug that brings about nasty health effects in and of itself, maybe you'd just go to 300 testosterone and make up that additional 200 milligram of androgen load with something else. Would you be losing out there as compared to using an AI? No, because the testosterone, the only thing the testosterone does that would benefit over other drugs is estrogen. So reducing it makes no sense. If you have to reduce it because you see side effects, you would just adjust the stack.
Why do you think AIs are so commonly used or abused?
Because it's easy, and because it's lazy, and because there's a misunderstanding of how to correctly design drug stacks. I mean, you see these things like test is best. You need a minimum of 1,000 milligrams of testosterone cycle. I mean, that's just unadulterated ignorance to the pharmacology here. you know, that just comes from the mouths of people that have no practical understanding of how these chemicals work.
Yeah.
And you know, it's just something that's been done, so continues being done. There's a reason why anabolic steroids, I mean, I will note here that testosterone isn't an anabolic steroid. To be an anabolic steroid, it would have to be down further path of having a divorce from androgenicity. So it would just be like a bioidentical androgen. The reason why further molecules were synthesized from testosterone derivatives or 19-norandrogen derivatives or dihydrotestosterone derivatives was to be able for us to access the positive benefits, like one being anabolism. You know, imagine these compounds being deployed for muscle wasting disease patients, cachexia patients, age patients, whatever. We need those skeletal muscle hypertrophy potential, whilst minimizing off-target side effects for people like the androgen sensitive, like women or like elderly men. You know, so there's absolutely no reason why we would just say, okay, take this drug to correct the negatives from this other drug that brings about its own negatives on top of the negatives of the other drug. It's kind of like, hold, we're lost in this weird, like, you know, hold on, why don't we instead just use other drugs that have been invented to do what we're trying to do, which is probably this additional expression of anabolism at the androgen receptor itself, which other drugs do just fine, and are clinically deployed to do exactly that. So yeah, I just think it's probably just an ignorance to what these drugs actually do, or laziness, because it's easy to band-aid something.
Yeah, true. And I know we spoke about it maybe a couple of weeks ago, and I'm pretty certain you said there was a study which showed the negative outcomes of just taking Arimidex or an AI on its own, and compared to cancer patients themselves, the actual negative outcomes were in some cases worse than the cancer patient without taking the Arimidex. Is that right, Joe? You might be able to.
Yeah, so this is the irony now that breast cancer patients are avoiding the use of AIs to treat breast cancer. So that meta-analysis confirmed that an AI is not the best therapy for all postmenopausal women with these estrogen receptor positive early stages of breast cancer. The conclusions in the study, to clarify why AIs, when compared with tamoxifen, they increased disease-free survival, but not overall survival. So the toxicities of the AIs counteracted the decreased recurrence rates of cancers. So even in those circumstances, the relative toxicities of AIs are kind of avoided, which maybe speaks volumes for why a healthy young man who's bodybuilding and already risking deleterious health outcomes would avoid them, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's an important message, really, isn't it? Particularly to, well, anybody, but particularly young people coming into the sport. You know, they're given this information and then, or told it, and take it kind of, you know, these stacks literally without any real understanding of what the negative outcomes are to the health. And, you know, I know how bad the AIs are because I know people, breast cancer victims, who've said that you know, taking those drugs, they felt absolutely awful on them, just, you know, the outcomes just from taking those drugs alone. So, you know, a young guy who's wants to be in his prime, or even girls, I've subscribed these in the bodybuilding world. So, you know, it is a topic of some you know, subject that I want to kind of make, not with you, Joe, not on today's podcast, but it's something that we and we've spoken about ourselves, is trying to educate people to be able to understand what you know, what they are taking and the outcomes of what they're taking, really. Okay, let's pick up another question then from Simon Dyer. Where is it? So he's Simon Jack Fitness on Instagram, and his question was around, what are your thoughts on there's recent debate on this Maingaining versus a traditional bulk he's put clean food. I'm imagining he's put a clean traditional bulk. With regards to hypertrophy, I think he means bodybuilding.
I mean, it's a hard question because there's definitions in here, but I'm not sure what their exact meaning is.
So I mean, what that Maingaining, from what I understand, it's literally it's staying just outside of your maintenance, so like a 50 to 100 calorie surplus to try to gain muscle but stay lean all year round, as close to stage as possible, as opposed to like a lean bulk where, or the name lean bulk, where we would increase calories, good calories, but go above kind of, you know, a 50 to 100 and potentially up to 6 to 12 pounds over our normal weight.
Okay, so on this Maingaining, if you were sitting around an energy balance, and again, this would depend on the individual's goal. Like, can you gain skeletal muscle tissue and lose body fat? I say at the same time. It's not going to be at exactly the same time. There's always going to be a flux between surplus and deficit. But yeah, if you're driving the imposed demands that are going to result in the adaptation of muscle growth and you've got sufficient nutrient there, yes, but it's going to move at an extremely slow magnitude. So if your goal is just to kind of maintain and look a bit better around the same weight, yeah, especially if you're enhanced and you've got potentiated anabolic pathways and attenuated lipogenic pathways, you can do this. If your goal is to add size as quickly as possible, then you want to start creeping your energy surplus up to what would be allowing you the maximum rate of protein accretion. But you do need to remember that there's a ceiling. It isn't dose response. It's very much going to be an inverted U curve, you know. There's going to be an amount of food that's going to have you at the top end of protein accretion. So there's going to be a surplus that's allowing you to maximally drive those adaptations of muscle growth to whatever demands you're putting in there, whether it's training or drug use, whatever it is. And anything past that is not going to be used and is just going to be stored as adipose tissue, which will eventually lead to insulin resistance and lead to a skewed fat to muscle gain ratio, and then lead to that phase being shorter than it could have been. So, I mean, whichever way you choose, I'm assuming this individual, because they refer to bodybuilding, that the goal is maximum muscle mass gain. It would be track where your surplus needs to be to top out that protein accretion, and keep an eye on markers like what your physique's looking like, maybe calipers, maybe markers of glucose tolerance like blood glucose, or if you get blood work, keep a check on your HbA1c, or get a homeostatic model assessment of insulin resistance, like your fasted insulin or something like this. And ultimately just keep weight going on at the rate that you can to keep body composition in check. But you can't expect to stay too lean. And there's a great biological inter-individual response here of what that amount's going to be. I often give the example of Christian, who we dieted for that photo shoot. Yeah. We had to essentially take about 6 or 7 weeks of just purposely putting body fat on him from there, because he cannot efficiently train or think or live or sleep. All of his nervous system markers were off. All his stress markers were off. His sleep and stress management was awful because he was too lean to be able to be in a comfortable spot. You have to look at your autonomic nervous system at that point and say, what capacity do I have to pay the fee of the charges that are going to be made to me here in order to create that adaptation of muscle mass gain?
Yeah, I think in a summary, if you want to gain muscle quickly, then you've got to go over that excess and over that maintenance a little bit more than the trickling. That Maingaining, for me, it's too close to the maintenance. That on some days you're going to be in a deficit because just purely of your output. You even in your natural daily activity stuff, you soak 50 calories or 100 calories over your maintenance is not a lot at all. So you're not going to lose muscle mass, but you're going to grow at such a slow rate that it's hardly worth doing if your main goal is to gain muscle.
Yeah, Yeah, you absolutely have to see an uptick in scale weight if maximum muscle mass gained is your goal. You can't just kind of maintain. Will you make improvements? Yeah, but they'll be excruciatingly slow.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's go to Gareth then. So excluding tren, how long do you think until the first real SARM that can match anabolics comes into the market?
It's a hard question because the thing that stands out to me in this question is match anabolics. Are we talking clinically, or are we talking escalated dose for bodybuilder outcomes? And that becomes important because as doses are escalated, tissue selectivity is lost. And that's been the problem with SARMs up to this point, pretty much. There's a, like Ostarine, 1 milligram was great, 3 milligram was great, 5 milligram, it failed. It's going to be the same thing with Trenbolone. Maybe at like the 50 milligram every 10 days in women. Yeah, highly tissue selective. 500 milligram in a bodybuilder. The androgenicity is going to be far. But I do firmly believe that SARMs, non-steroidal SARMs, are the future. They will, they will absolutely be the bodybuilder's holy grail. If we could have something, hey, look, take this pill, firstly, orally, great. So we don't have to inject ourselves anymore. And then it's only going to bind in skeletal muscle tissue. You don't have to worry about what's happening to any beta amyloid in the brain or any prostate binding or any whatever, because there's androgen receptors everywhere. If we could only have it bind in skeletal muscle, well, amazing. That's what we want, right? How long? I don't know, but some research is coming on, and it's an invested area because we do need these drugs. These drugs are required, but they're required for the androgen sensitive, for females and for elderly men. Again, for men, I'm not that interested because we have enough. What more do we need? Like, come on, we got people that can walk around at over 300 pounds on the compounds that we've got. That might be a bit of a silly argument because maybe they get there with severe health risks. Yes, I understand that. But I personally think for a male bodybuilder, we've got more than enough at our disposal that has a great enough divorce from androgenicity that we're not going to necessarily be creeping into. That's not the danger territory for us.
Yeah.
But maybe if I was going to answer the question, I don't know, 10 years. 10 years.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? It's a difficult one.
Yeah, well, we've got tren, so we don't need anything else.
Okay, there's one from Anita here. So her question is around fat, and as you know, she's quite lean on her top, but she considers a bad area as her legs and her bottom, and she's carrying it. Proportionally, I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, but she says it herself, is proportionally a lot more in the kind of glute and thigh area. She's asking, is there anything you'd recommend to help with this? That's a big topic to try to cover, I know.
I think this is very common in women around these areas that we could refer to as stubborn body fat areas. Really what we mean by that is alpha receptor dense areas, alpha receptor rich areas. So, the simple answer would be to use a compound that antagonizes alpha receptors. So combined up with alpha receptors within these adipocytes and allow binding at beta receptors to occur, and then free fatty acid mobilization, transport and oxidation to occur. For lipolysis to be able to readily occur in these areas. So something like yohimbine HCl is used typically orally, so it can work systemically, it can bind to alpha receptors and then allow beta receptor binding to occur. Like we say, there is some evidence on topical fat burners, so to speak, topical ways of free fatty acid mobilization. But this has been with compounds like aminophylline. I know like MPA make a supplement that's topical yohimbine. I can see how it would work, but I feel like what would happen then is it would just sort of end up in the blood anyway. Another thing that would come to mind, again, I can't think of any, like, I'm kind of pulling this out my ass. There's no literature on this, but it would make sense, especially combined with yohimbine, is if you heat the area. you would mobilize more fatty acids. So maybe if you got like, what's the stuff called? Neoprene. If you could like neoprene wrap your legs or something like that.
She does do that. She's got leg wraps, thigh wraps, and
I noticed that at the gym the other day, and I thought, oh yeah, okay. That combined with your himbine and some fasted activity, that would be the main solution. And Lyle McDonald talks about this in his women's book. This is something that many women do face. So yeah, it's not I wouldn't worry. It's not novel. It's not unique in a sense. And yeah, I would probably go down the yohimbine route, but be aware that it is highly sympathetically taxing as well. You probably should combine it with caffeine as well. And yeah, that's what I would recommend. That's the only thing that immediately comes to mind, other than, the fact is, if you keep losing fat, it will eventually come off, but it may come off more at a global rate, head to toe, front to back, if you put some like yohimbine in there, rather than you get absolutely peeled everywhere else. And then you start mobilizing from those areas,
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you there, moving away from Anita, but she would fall into this category if we pushed her, continue to keep pushing her, and many females have got almost a split body part of, lean upper body and then a kind of a much bigger lower body. What's your experience when you've you really wanted to get rid of all that body fat on the lower half, but the upper body then starts to just, you can see it in the face. The balance between upper and lower is too big to take it off all in one go. So have you had experience with that yourself? I find it more so as the ladies get a little bit older, particularly, post 20, into the 30s, late 20s, early 30s. From that point onwards, you start to see the heavier lower body.
Yeah, well, a lot of this, I mean, no matter how you get there, it will come off. It has to. And I see someone's just asked, how does age affect fat loss in women? The main thing we need to look at here is what's going to happen hormonally. So estradiol is primarily responsible through the process of lipogenesis, the female fat patterning that you'd see. But estradiol does also carry many lipolytic benefits as well. I mean, estradiol is a demonized molecule in general. I say estradiol for anyone listening. You could just think of that as estrogen. So really, if you'd have to look at the individual case, are they cycling normally? At what point are they progestin or estrogen dominant? How do you factor that into their programming? Like with some of my women, we'd have times that we're maybe pushing the deficit harder or pushing their training load harder. Like when their estrogen's higher, they're going to have a greater uptake of glucose and a greater uptake of triglyceride, which is a primary fuel source for resistance training. So maybe that's when our highest volume week would be in the mesocycle. Similar thing with fat loss. Whenever they're going to have the greatest proclivity to drive fatty acid mobilization hormonally, that's when you could attack that and maybe get a bigger bit done. And you might just find yourself running in circles if they're in a super high progestin dominant part of the cycle. The latter part of the hormonal cycle, right before their period, it may not be the best time for you to try and be aggressive and pull off body fat. And again, how does age affect fat loss in women? Well, you practically have an attenuation of all hormones if you're postmenopausal. My honest advice would be to get a private endocrinologist and get hormone replacement therapy. You're going to have a large attenuation of androgens as well. So your ability to remodel skeletal muscle tissue and drive lipolysis is going to be massively reduced in a poor hormonal environment. It would be like us comparing a natural athlete to an enhanced athlete in bodybuilding. They're nowhere near the same magnitude of fat loss. If you've got a woman that's at a part of the hormonal cycle that isn't on hormonal birth control, let's say, and androgen's fine, they're in an estrogen dominant part of the hormonal cycle, their fat loss as compared to a postmenopausal woman is going to be off the chain, or rather their ability to, because weight loss will be the same. I should really say their ability to drive positive body composition outcomes is going to be greater. And if you ever look at female hormonal birth control literature across the board, the heavy hitters of progesterone are the worst in terms of body composition outcomes. And you could mimic that when, if you look at the hormonal cycle, like we say here, the worst outcomes are going to be from a progestin rich environment, you know? So that's something I'd say about females in that sense, something to be aware of.
I know Jenny personally, she's a lady in her later years now. So I would imagine that she's probably gone through the menopause already. And she is on a kind of like a weight loss journey at the minute. So your recommendation was to go see a private a doctor and maybe get some hormone replacement.
Yeah, because I suppose I can legally say that. If you're, you know, this might sound a bit rash, but I believe this to be true. If you are concerned with your long-term health and quality of life and physique outcome and strength and bone mineral density or any of these things, I would recommend that we go down the line of better living through modern medicine. And you have the opportunity now. Part of dying is hormone attenuation. This part of what brings you to death. You become old and feeble, you lose bone mineral density, etc. You get weak as your androgens come down, as your estrogen comes down. You're essentially dying. There will be life, certainly quality of life extension properties of having your hormones in what we'd call an optimal range. You can look at hormones like a U, right? Like a U shape. At the bottom of the U, and on this axis here, let's say we've got adverse events, negative health outcomes. And as we're in this range of hormones here, this is the optimal range. We have optimal health outcomes, positive health outcomes. If you go too far above for pro bodybuilders cases or too far below for postmenopausal women's cases, you get negative health outcomes. So if you can keep yourself in this optimal range for as much time as possible, you're in a positive health outcome zone. And it's clear now that we're finally getting data on like multi-decade use of things like testosterone replacement therapy. We see reduced disease risk, improved quality of life, improved health across the board. That, you know, this is something that we should be interested in and is readily accessible to us these days, but it's very new, so it isn't often done, you know?
Okay, awesome. That's really interesting, that, Joe. Thank you. We haven't got any more questions on the thing, so if people, you still got a few people on, so please do put your questions and comments now for Joe to answer. I'm going to ask him some myself. Let's just talk about your business then, Joe. Joe Jeffries Coaching, and what does that do? You know, what clients do you have? What services do you offer?
So I work with about 95% of my clients that are enhanced now, men and women. Not all of them competitors. Maybe half of my clients are competitors. I work primarily with people that are trying to make large changes that maybe would have otherwise fallen into a greater risk category. Maybe if left to their own devices would do something that maybe they shouldn't do. But these are people that have high goals. They want to make big physique changes. You know, they want to add 100 pounds of body weight, or they want to get peeled for this reason or that, or they just want to drive big differences in their physique. I work with these people in a sense to try to keep them as healthy as possible along the road, offer them maybe not what you'd call a safe outcome, but a safer outcome, a way to bodybuild and make maximum physique progress and ultimately end up in the same place, but maintain positive health outcomes as much as possible, you know. So that's the majority of my clients, both on a coaching relationship and also on a consultation relationship. Much less consultations these days because my client list is full. So I spend most of my time doing check-ins and stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Just dealing with people's training, drug use, supplementation, diet, and a little bit of educational stuff on the side. But yeah, that's the majority of my client base. And the people that I'm more so interested with now, if I had a Gen Pop client come along now, I would refer them off to one of my mentees, you know, rather than work with them myself.
Okay, so you've got your own kind of niche, which is a good place to be, I think. You know, if we're looking at what you do, Joe, that you touched on it earlier. Before that science-based evidence was available, you know, when I started bodybuilding, I wanted to get as big as possible, and you know, there was no guidance out there. There was no help. You listened to the biggest guy in the gym, or what you thought was the biggest guy in the gym. But you know, it's good now that there is more people like you coming along with you know, intelligence and the studying and using evidence base to what you said is the key, isn't it? These people are going to get there no matter what. What you're doing it's like almost like one of these films that you watch where they've got a journey, like Lord of the Rings or something like that, where, you know, they've got to get there, and you know, you've got to get to that destination. Well, you're going with them along that destination and helping them to get there without dying along the way. So I think that's a key role that modern physique coaches like yourself play in particularly in the role of enhanced bodybuilding, which is where your niche is. Okay, so we have got a couple more questions coming on, and so Rachel, I know Rachel trains a corpus, and she's asked a question first, but we probably need more information from you, Rachel, in the sense of, you know, what was the best thing to do to help recovery?
Sleep.
Is that from like a heavy session in the gym? Do you mean like, you know, with muscle aching after the gym, or is that like going out on the pop on at the weekend and having a good session? I don't, you know, Rachel, it's just, do you mean after a session, after like a gym session, like instantly, or do you mean from an illness or something like that? Just give us a little bit more. I know you've asked another question, so we'll pick up on that one first. Oh, so she said yes. So Rachel, she obviously, most people have been on lockdown, Joe. So, and I've seen her in the gym for the first time this week, so she might be, I think that's what she's probably aching. And what she's asking is there any tips on kind of recovery from a heavy session?
So you want to nail off the basics, of course. Eating in a calorie surplus with all of your micronutrition status requirements nailed, of course. These are the things that everyone would look at, like get sufficient sleep, don't engage yourself in any other glucose intensive activity between training bouts, etc. But where people might not look, that might be worthwhile for Rachel here, is to pay attention to how much sympathetic tone or allostatic load is on a 24-hour basis. So I think we mentioned looking at autonomic nervous system like the bank, right? And when you train, you take a charge from the bank. So it costs recovery ability. You're going to have to pay that back in by some means. And there's other things that charge. And this can be anything from, you know, when you get cut off on the way to the gym, and you beep and you shout, well, that's a bit of adrenaline kick out. That's a bit of sympathetic tone. That costs. Every time you get a bit stressed at work, that's a cost. Every time you eat a meal in a rush and you don't chew your food properly, that's a cost. Minimize costs so you will have more in the bank to pay for a greater stimulus of training. You will be able to drive a greater demand, and you will also be able to drive a greater adaptation on the other side of that. So pay attention to what's happening on your autonomic nervous side. Stress and sleep management are key. And within them, falls things like good eating habits, eating away from stressful environments, paying attention to your food, eating mindfully, chewing slowly, sufficient sleep, meditation, anything that chills you out, is to pay attention to your autonomic nervous system.
I mean, there's no magic, amino acid or pill or things like that you can take, a can of something that repairs you. It is literally listening to your body, isn't it? And like you said, is resting, making sure the nutrition's in there. The sleep is important. All those key factors really are the accumulating factors to get over recovery. A lot of people do think, if they take amino acids or they take other things or they rub this in, it's going to help them with recovery. Well, it's like you said, it's more important that they rest and eat properly. Okay, so Sean Riley has asked a question what is the relationship between supplementing GABA while administering growth hormone?
Big Sean, I know Sean. Sean's a really cool dude, man. He's north of 300 pounds. He's an actor in LA. Been a while since I looked at GABA. This is gamma amino butyric acid. I think it is. It's an amino acid, an endogenous amino acid that functions as a neurotransmitter. So sending signals around your brain to do stuff in overly simplified terms. Its role is essentially as a calming agent for your central nervous system. So people use it to aid in sleep. There is literature that shows that it does increase endogenous growth hormone secretions quite a large amount. And I remember people getting hung up on this because, hey, look, take GABA to grow because it increases. I think it was 400% increase in endogenous growth hormone. The problem with endogenous hormones is that's still like NAFL. Like 400% of barely anything is still barely anything. Yeah, and also growth hormone in isolation does not lead to muscle growth either. I know this is a bit off topic. So Sean asks here, critically, whilst administering GH, so this is an exogenous recombinant growth hormone molecule being introduced here. So the relationship is nothing because your endogenous growth hormone is on a negative feedback loop. So even if you pin GH in the morning, you're still not secreting endogenous growth hormone that night. There's quite a delay in negative feedback. So if you're supplementing GABA, it's doing nothing to your growth hormone, no matter when you're dosing the growth hormone, if it's within like beyond a 24-hour period. So that there is no relationship to note here.
Okay, cool. Next question from Paul. He's asking, you'd like to know from us what you recommend for a natural bodybuilder to use for a natural muscle booster.
Nothing. If it worked, it would be illegal.
Food,
sleep, progressive. What you have at your disposal is progressive resistance training, progressive eating, and if you can even progress your rest, that's even better. So that is it. There really is no. I mean, there's ergogenic supplementation that is useful: creatine, caffeine, citrulline, beta-alanine in some circumstances. These all have ergogenic effects, but they're not anabolic in nature, so to speak. They're not going to drive huge myotrophic benefits. So yeah, probably nothing. And please don't spend your money on things like pro hormones or like we spoke about SARMs. One, because you will no longer be natural. Two, they are either highly hepatotoxic or inefficient or don't work at all.
What's that African herb that they sell in Boots that said it's a male testosterone? I always forget the name of it, but it promises to boost your testosterone. And
I remember the one used to be horny goat weed.
Yeah, I wouldn't forget that. No, there's another one which is I can't remember the name of it, but it's a common. It's a natural testosterone booster that you can buy in Tesco's and things like that. I can't remember the name, so it's pointless in talking about it. But
I don't know. I've never heard of it.
It might come to me in a minute. Okay, Rachel's asked another question. Again, obviously, this is after lockdown. Rachel's trying to understand whether it'd be best to jump straight into a strict diet and a workout, or slowly kind of and gradually work our way into like a better diet and more frequent workouts.
It depends on your personal adherence on one hand, and also on the other hand, what degree of adjustment do you need to create the results that you desire? You may have goals just to drop a little bit of body fat. Let's say you need to drop a couple of pounds, and you're currently in a 1,000-calorie surplus because you drink a liter of Coke a day. Well, you probably wouldn't need to go straight to a protein spray and modify fast to correct that. You know, you could just pull out the Coke, replace it with Diet Coke. So it is a very individual circumstance here, and that's the same thing with training. You've been away from training for a long time. There's going to be a great degree of neurological relearning that has to happen here. And your response to even the smallest amount of mechanical loading is still going to be considered novel. At the end of the day, why does progressive overload work so well? Is because it's novel. That's it. You have to have a novel demand. And to you right now, anything's more novel than doing nothing. If you look at any study on any activity, taking an untrained individual, they gain muscle and lose fat across the board. Even jogging, they gain muscle and lose body fat. So the question would be, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to compete in the Bikini Olympia next year? You probably do have to put your foot down and get it just done. Maximum output. But even then, there's going to be a ceiling on how much you can do. If your goal is just to lose a couple of pounds, or just, you know, maybe gain a bit of muscle over the next year, maybe gain 3 pounds of muscle over the next year, you've got space to ease in. And what we mentioned first, let's say you go straight in with a 6-day per week resistance training plan and a protein spray and modify fast. If you break after 5 days, then it was a waste of time. So ultimately, your adherence, what can you actually do and stick to? Because consistency outweighs any degree of perfection in any programming.
Yeah. Wouldn't you? Let's just kind of analyze that a second. Would you actually literally put someone into that if you knew that they could adhere to it? I suppose again the question is, how soon do they want the outcome? But I doubt very much that you would, unless it was under kind of like a really unusual condition, that you would put someone on the highest kind of diet, the strictest diet and the heaviest, well, not necessarily heaviest, but a really hard program straight off the bounce. But I would imagine that would be something that you've probably never done, or maybe only done once or twice.
It would be an extreme waste of time, because what that individual needs to drive maximum response is going to be less than that.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's I was hoping to say that, because that's what I was trying to drive out. I think what the answer probably would be is, and you said it yourself, is that depending on how dirty or naughty the diet is, most people on lockdown that are seeing, the diet has relaxed, and they've brought things in that they wouldn't normally have eaten. So the small steps that will make big changes will be to take those things out, like you said, the can of Coke or the chocolate bar or the biscuits, or whatever those naughty or bad things are. Just clean your diet up, and that gives massive response. You'd get a good response very quickly from that, and then kind of gradually, depending on your timelines. Now, Rachel, I don't know what your timelines are. I know at some point you were wanting to go into tone figure. She was bikini. She just on the kind of borderline bikini and going into tone figure, and she wanted to grow some more muscle. So if that's still the case, then she doesn't need to go into a high fat loss type diet. My advice would be just to ease into it, generally tidy it up, and like Joe said, just start training in the gym. That very basic stimulus that you're going to get, the new stimulus from the gym, will be enough to trigger some muscle growth, and then start thinking about a more kind of permanent plan, or in fact, with your trainer, I would probably think about a simple maybe push-pull system. Joe, I don't know, what would you reckon? Just something like that, just to start off with, and
or like a full body. Just do full
Yeah.
body 3 times a week, or full body push, full body pull, like you said.
yeah,
because your volume requirements are going to be nothing.
Yeah, look, she's admitted the biscuits, so.
No, don't cut out the biscuits. They're anabolic. Yeah, I mean, and this leaks into what I do with clients as well. I'm always trying to have the minimum. Sorry, did you hear that phone ringing then?
Yeah.
So that's Jasmine trying to ring me whilst I'm on this. She should be watching.
She's saying, "Hurry up and get off."
She's over in Birmingham. She's got a photo shoot in Scotland this weekend.
Nice.
What was I saying then? Yeah, the minimum effective dose is what we want here, because we want runway, right? Because Rachel, I'm sure if I said to you, do you want to still be making progress next year? You'd probably say, yeah, of course I don't want to make progress forever. So when you design a client model, it's not like, right, how much can I get them to progress in the next 12 weeks? It's more so, right, I'd like them to still be progressing in 12 years. But we've got to give, you can't just do more and more and more and more and more and more and more. There's only so much any human can do. So you have to give yourself as much runway for every phase as possible. So if you only require like 4 sets per week to get maximum returns, or to get where you want to be, do that. And then go to 6 when you need, and then go to 8 when you need. Same thing with the diet. So then if you need to just pull down, she should be watching this, to be honest. And then, if you just need to pull down 300 calories, if you just need to drop those biscuits to get things moving to the degree that you want, that's all you need to do. And then, okay, I'm not progressing anymore. What's the next step? And then what's the next step? Then what's the next step? Because if you go 100%, where do you go?
Exactly. Everyone's journey is a runway, though, isn't it? Most people, it's not a case of getting it done in 4 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks. There's a much longer term to that. And I know Rachel, because she does want to grow muscles, she has got a long-term commitment to putting that on. So she does want to grow more muscle. So
yeah, growing muscle for women is a long and arduous process. Protein accretion is slow at the best of times, let alone for a woman. And I don't know if she is or not, but if you're a natural woman, very long and arduous process.
She is a natural competitor, yeah.
So patience is going to be the key virtue here. Even gaining a pound of stage weight a year for an advanced female trainee is a big deal. So
I think she just, at the minute, probably just wants to lose a bit of weight, but cutting out the biscuits, I think, is the key, Rachel.
Yeah, unless they're cookie dealer, then they're calorie free.
Yeah, that'll be the whole calories for one day, I think.
Yeah, I imagine so.
All right, Joe. I think we've covered all the questions, and it was really good to have you on, and there was some good topics there that we covered. I don't think I've missed anything out from your perspective, from a coaching perspective. Is there anything that you want to say, you want to mention? Actually, there's something I wanted to say. It struck me when I was trying to think about when you think about someone and something reminds you of them. Well, 3 things I think come to mind when I think about Joe Jeffries. First one is blue light glasses.
I haven't got them on.
I know you haven't got them on. The next thing is the Aura ring, and then you've got it on. And then the third thing is dark chocolate.
Yes, I'm about to eat 40 grams now. Yes.
Yeah. It's funny because I think looking over the years, I've been following you. Those 3 things particularly that stand out to me as what remind me of yourself. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think they're characterizing me well. Yeah.
There's just one. Sean Blackwood has just joined. This is a good one. I know we've covered this in the past. So do you want to just answer this question for Sean? It's with the recent pandemic, have we spoken about how people can boost the immune system, and whether through supplementation or not? So I know you know the answer to this. So do you want to fire away?
I think well, the first thing to note.
If you follow me for the last.
Sorry about that. Up on my, that was TikTok, whatever that is. So I think what we need to pay attention to is there's been now correlation isn't causation. I know that there's been great correlation between people that have caught COVID-19 and D3 deficiency. So at least having some kind of vitamin D3 supplementation for us living in the UK makes sense. I can't see who this person is, but if you're Caucasian, definitely. But even more, I was going to say it might not be as most important. Note that most of the individuals that were showing D3 deficiency were black people living in the West. So this is important. If you are black or mixed race, your D3 requirements would likely, or rather your D3 synthesis would probably require a higher degree of supplementation. So at least 5,000 units of D3 for sure. And really that would be a year-round thing anyway, or at least should be. Aside from that, ensuring that all of your micronutrient needs are met, and I would recommend that we escalate that beyond the RDA. Note that the RDA was created essentially as the minimum required to avoid deficiency. If you're an enhanced athlete or you're hypermuscular or you resistance train, those needs will be escalated, including various cofactors of things like insulin in there, like magnesium, selenium, chromium. These are things that we definitely need to get on top of. And again, as an enhanced athlete or a resistance trainee, we're driving oxidative stress pretty damn high, which can compromise the nervous system and the immune system. Also, another offshoot interesting point is immune cells have androgen receptors, which is probably how COVID-19 was again related to hypergonadal men, greater incidence risk. So having a good hormonal profile. But how to boost the immune system? There's not really a lot you can do to boost it, but rather put yourself in a good spot should you come under fire, essentially. So D3, an array of elevated antioxidant supplementation, I think, and nailing things like magnesium, zinc, a good EPA and DHA. Some antioxidants I really like N-acetylcysteine, melatonin, a high epicatechin green tea extract, vitamin E, vitamin C, ubiquinol. I think these are all things that are pretty cheap bulk buy ingredients, but we will definitely, as bodybuilders, have escalated requirements of that we can draw benefit from. Alongside just the basics, being well hydrated, having a solid electrolyte balance, being active. These are all things that we absolutely need to nail. But there's not a lot of supplementation out there that you can say, yeah, this is going to boost your immune system. I think that's a bit of a misnomer.
Yeah, you use the Jarrow zinc with copper, don't you, as well, balance?
Yeah, I have done. I haven't for a while. I've just been using straight zinc citrate, but that zinc balance is a great one for people that maybe don't know how to dose their zinc or can't bother to think about it, because it includes the cofactor being copper. So it kind of handles that for you. And that's great for things like histamine balance.
I mean, is it worth, and I'm mentioning there just a quick one because we want to finish, and I know Jazz is trying to call you, but you use chronometer, don't you?
Yes.
And so a lot of the things you were talking there about were kind of mineral and vitamin balances, and I know for a fact that since you've been using chronometer that you've structured your food more. You're getting a better balance through your food. You're getting your mineral and nutrient balance through your food, and you're using something like chronometer to make sure that you're getting enough of those nutrients via your food and not necessarily the supplementation. So that's another thing that potentially people should be looking at is eating good whole food and vegetables and fruit, etc., and not relying necessarily on a tablet made in a lab.
Yeah, I mean, the fact of it is there isn't any data out there on these like highly concentrated greens powders. So although, you know, you could say, yeah, the molecule's the same, it's the same vitamin, the same mineral. Yeah, maybe. Same thing with like potassium and like low salt potassium citrate and stuff. Maybe, but you could just be sure to nail it if you just, you know, put a little bit of effort into a good nutritional design, which really isn't hard. You know, set yourself the goal of at least 15 different fruits and vegetables a day, at least 4 different protein sources, maybe 3 different starchy carb sources. That's easy. And you've probably ticked off your requirements then. But when people don't think about it, you end up with these huge deficiencies. I had a consultation with a bikini competitor last week. It's quite high level, like being the Olympia next year. And we put her chronometer in to, put her current diet from her current coach into chronometer. And her magnesium, 4 milligrams. The average requirement for a female that resistance trains probably being about 600 milligrams. And that's a cofactor of insulin. So the nutrient transport, specifically when it comes to carbohydrates, is going to be massively attenuated with that, you know. And you look at that and you go, what? That's so easy to fix.
Yeah.
To just make a little bit of effort. And I mean, how long does it take to put your diet into chronometer? You know, even if your first time, 10 minutes maximum. And then you'll be like, oh, look, I'm only getting 20 milligrams of calcium, you know, or, oh, look at my selenium. It's nothing. Maybe I need to supplement with that. Or on chronometer, if you click on the mineral type or the vitamin type, it tells you what foods are high in it. So it's super easy to work that stuff out. And that's, you know, I've had all of these crazy client transformations that I've put on my Instagram and be like, you know, 1 week in or 2 weeks in, and people are like, oh man, what drugs are you using on that? That's crazy. Like, no, it was just such a crap diet that we flushed off a load of interstitial fluid. You push nutrient partitioning up so you filled up intramuscularly, and you'll look completely different and feel different. And it's the basic stuff. And then everything else works better, you know?
And just going back to Rachel, that's potentially what she needs to do, is just a recomp and just put some good food in. You know, depending on how many biscuits she was having, you know, she just needs to literally put more nutritional food in, and she should see, you know, a really good drop off of water and a, you know, quite a good change quite rapidly. So
yeah.
Okay, so let's wrap it up then. Thanks, Sean, for that last question. I just want to say thanks, Joe, for joining me. It was great to have you on board. If anyone wants Joe's details, I have put all his details on the YouTube channel, but it's relatively simple. It's Joe Jeffery Coaching on Instagram, and his website is also joejeffreycoaching.com. So yeah, give him a follow if you don't follow him already. He's a very knowledgeable guy and a great guy. And that's it for today. So thanks, Joe, and I'll see you in a couple of days, maybe tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, I'll be in there tomorrow, mate. Yeah, no, thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Joe. See you later now.
See you later, buddy.